Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ambassador Bajpai, Ambassador Surendra Kumar, uh, friends in the audience and fellow panelists. I think most of the issues, in a sense, have been covered by previous speakers. And we can see that there has been a change or transformation in the India-US relationship in recent times. And I think there are two factors which really enabled this change. One was the end of the Cold War, because in a sense that had led to divergent perspectives in terms of how the two countries approached the world. And the second was the opening up of the Indian economy. Now both happened roughly around the same time. If you take a look, it's really end 80s, early 90s. But yet, I think while the business relationship between India and the United States began to take off in the early 90s, the political relationship, I think, continued to lag because both countries had still some residual suspicions or what could I say, habits in terms of how they looked at each other and looked at the relationship. We've had a lot of speakers talk about the excitement of the new potential in the relationship with the India-US nuclear deal and the fact that it would be taken forward. I think that perhaps sometimes we pin too much hope on a single agreement. The relationship is broader than that. I mean, yes, the nuclear deal was important. It meant, in a sense, that we were able to put behind us an issue which had bedeviled the relationship for many years. And in some way, it created a space for India legitimately within the international system to do commerce in the civil nuclear field. But if you take a look at the overall, kind of energy requirements of India that would be met by nuclear. I mean, at the time the deal was signed, the total nuclear energy generation in India was 3% of India's energy generation. And even when we would meet our targets, which the Department of Atomic Energy has set, it would be around 7%. So the bulk of our energy generation would still have to come from other sources. The excitement of the nuclear deal, in a sense, couldn't have been sustained on that kind of adrenaline high. And there are the, day-to-day issues of managing the relationship, which have come to the fore. And therefore, I think a sense that perhaps there's been a plateau in the relationship, that the promise and the excitement has not been fulfilled to the extent that both countries would have wished. Now, I think that there are certainly both common values. Somebody said that values don't matter. Democracy, yes, the fact of both being democracies is not what I would call a fundamental fact in the relationship. But when you talked of the comfort level between people, it stems from the fact that both come from similar systems. They are used to the give and take of democracies, and they are used to very open discussion and debate. So I think the fact that we do come from democracies has a value which shapes the way in which people interact with each other and enhances the comfort level that we feel. So in an indirect way, it does contribute to the relationship. But beyond values, I think there are certainly common interests which would be key drivers of the relationship at any particular time. Now, if you look at India's economy post-liberalization, then you see that the economic tie-up with the United States has helped India, I would say, even in a strategic sense, because it opened up new sectors of the economy, such as the IT sector, such as the biotechnology sector, which would not really have taken off except for the linkage with the US economy and with US companies. Because the backward linkages of IT into the Indian economy were still very limited and are still really somewhat limited, but our exports of IT related services and so on, with the US as the largest market, was a big driver, in a sense, of the technological revolution in India. Yes, today that relationship may not necessarily be as enthusiastic as it used to be, and this stems from difficulties which both countries are experiencing internally. Some of the problems in the relationship, and I think Ambassador Bajpai mentioned it, have arisen from problems which both countries have been grappling with internally, their domestic preoccupations, in a sense. With the US first taken up with the presidential elections, and then still grappling with global crisis in the Middle East and West Asia and so on, and with its own economy. And right now you have an economic shutdown. And India itself also going through a period of downturn in its economy and a sense of, things not happening, or decision making being slowed because of our own internal difficulties or preoccupations. And this, in a sense, because of the downturn in the Indian economy, the sense that decision making is delayed, yes, there have been difficulties on both sides, and also because of increasing recourse to protectionism by some of the US IT companies, who are looking now at Indian companies more in the nature of competitors, because our exports have grown, from say, a couple of $100 million. Today they are in the region of $70 billion. So obviously there is an element of competition, but still I would say that there is a large element of complementarity between the two economies. And the US investment in India has also helped to build the US cutting edge in several areas of research, and will continue to do so. And I think this is an element which both countries need to explore and develop further to their mutual benefit. In the strategic or the sphere of security, certainly we have convergent interests in trying to develop a sustainable Asian balance which would be conducive to longer term peace, stability and prosperity in Asia. While at the same time we may have differences in terms of how to handle the region, whether it's Afghanistan or Pakistan or even West Asia. But there are very broad convergences which are going to shape this relationship into the future. Now, two important things which were decided during this visit. One was in the field of defense, where Brahmachalani mentioned we've gone from no trade to orders worth over $8 billion and still growing, but largely in the field of defensive equipment, transport and surveillance equipment. The two leaders agreed on a kind of defense partnership or principles of a defense partnership, where the US has talked of India being treated like one of their closest allies. When I went there, we were treated on par with Sudan and Vietnam in terms of the US export control regime for defense exports. So this would be a significant, if we're able to work through this and materialize it, then this would be a significant easing of the regime which applies to India-US defense cooperation. And then the two countries have expressed their intention to go beyond just trade, to look at co-development, joint research, co-production and so on. I think it's going to take a little while to materialize, but if we want to build the relationship into the future, then I think it's important that we look at ways in which we can work together in strengthening India's defense production capabilities within India, because that is one of the key objectives of our national policy. In the civil nuclear field, you have an agreement between Westinghouse and the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited, an early works agreement to commence, because it means that government to government formalities have been completed and now the companies can begin negotiations. Of course, this doesn't mean that difficulties relating to the liability law, etc., are still, have been removed, but it means that we've taken a step forward, because while there were procedural issues on the Indian side, there were also procedural issues on the US side in terms of their bureaucratic requirements, like the 810 assurances, which had to be implemented, and both countries have worked, slowly and steadily to try to complete all the procedural requirements on both sides for discussions to commence. Looking beyond the strategic relationship, you have the people-to-people relationship, which is very strong and will also be a key driver in the relationship, because it's not just a top-down relationship. It has broad support amongst people on both sides. But what is important, and I think where it lacks something, is really ownership of the relationship to steer it, because some old attitudes still persist. So I think we should not hesitate. We need to have people who can speak up for the benefits of the relationship, and leaders who will look at the kind of difficulties which the very fluid global environment places on countries like India, and iterate the value of the India-US relationship in this context. Thank you.